Welcome back to Cody in the Cinema. Today, I'm discussing 5 movies that I think punch above their weight. And I'm going to go over 3 cult classics, 1 family movie classic, and then something a little bit artsier that I feel like has gone under the radar somewhat as far as those type of movies go. I recently turned on Tubi. I like Tubi for these kind of movies. And I wanted to try Sleepaway Camp because I've been going through some of these campy horror movies and some of the slashers have appealed to me. And I expected this one to be pretty bad. And I was delightfully surprised with how well crafted it was. And despite some of its inherent limitations, how much I really enjoyed it and thought it was an all-time classic horror movie. So Sleepaway Camp, if you haven't heard of it, it's one of those bare-bones slashers with, some teenagers that end up in a string of murders at a summer camp. There's a mysterious young girl who has some trauma early on in her life, and she's sent to camp with her cousin. And we're kind of, in the movie, trying to figure out who this killer is and how it may or may not relate to this troubled young girl who barely speaks. And there was a particular scene in this movie that as I was watching it, I thought, I've got to share this with people as an example of why I think these kind of movies are so popular and why I think this one works so well. There's a conversation in one of the bunkhouses, and the girls are sitting around talking, and the room is a total mess. Everything is completely randomly thrown everywhere, and this one girl's sock is dirty, and that whole scene really feels like a lived-in, believable atmosphere. Like this is actually a summer camp. It's not overly clean. It's not overly tidy. The props weren't just wheeled in randomly. Like this is something that you can believe, and it adds to the cruddy kind of gross horror that comes along. And by the way, if you're a horror movie fan, Sleepaway Camp has a few terrific examples of what a good slasher kill looks like. I mean, it nails that part of the genre. The hokey dialogue in that one actually really helps the film. It's not something you have to look past like you do in some films in this genre. And the conversation, especially with the boys and the way that they interact, that's how teenage boys sound. And there's some struggle with hierarchy and stuff, how that goes. It also is not afraid to provide some scathing commentary on the adults' role in this world, because the adults aren't good people, especially one. And I was just surprised how dark and gruesome it was. And the ending to that movie was set up well, and I legitimately had to look away when I was watching it. It was a good ending. So again, it's campy, it's cult cinema. It's not some kind of artistically minded Bellatar masterpiece or something like that, but I loved it, and I watched it on Tubi. I'll probably get a copy of it because I just really thought it was good, and I thought it punched above its weight. Secondly, and Godzilla fans, I'm going to throw this out there. One of my favorite Godzillas that I've seen so far. I've seen a few of them, not as many as the dedicated fans. I've got this 2-pack here. Okay, well, let me get it out for you. Godzilla versus Spacegodzilla. All right, this one should not be as good as it is. And I know there's a mixed kind of reaction to this movie, but I feel like for a movie called Godzilla versus Spacegodzilla, it's absolutely excellent at what it does. So what do we want a Godzilla movie to do that's not the original? Well, we want it to have good Godzilla fighting. Godzilla versus Spacegodzilla, the fight at the end, is exactly what you want. Okay, Godzilla is overmatched against a more powerful opponent. That in and of itself is always interesting to me in these films. Godzilla has obviously been displayed in pop culture as this phenomenally powerful force, and anytime he's outmanned, I think it creates sort of an interesting film here. And this Space Godzilla was created from the power of a black hole. I mean, how much more of a threat could this thing be? And when Godzilla fights this, you've got these giant glowing crystals, great special effects. it's super cinematic and fun and blockbuster-like, but kind of dark and scary to watch. I mean, it's everything I love about a good Godzilla fight when those two fight. Okay, there's also another sad thing that happens in the movie that adds a little bit to it. You know, when you're watching Space Godzilla versus Godzilla and you find yourself feeling sorry for Godzilla and rooting for him to win the battle, that's a good Godzilla movie. You know, because there's this awesome, technologically superior being that looks cool, that seems like it should be, you know, more appealing, like the better car that you've always wanted, right? But instead, we root for Godzilla. And I have always liked the design of that creature, Space Godzilla, but again, you do want Godzilla to win, and I just love that one. So I'd be interested to see what some people like more in terms of these like campy, fun Godzilla movies, if there's one you like better, but I've always liked that one. So I think that one punches above its weight, because like I said, I mean, what would you expect out of a movie called Godzilla versus Space Godzilla? Third one, and this is one I've talked about it before, but I can't believe that we got a movie like Repo Man with the cast we had. I mean, Emilio Estevez, Harry Dean Stanton, who I frequently talk about on this channel, who remains one of the great actors who was always underutilized. And why not make a film, okay? A guy who's in charge of repossessing vehicles picks up a young, struggling kid who works, I think, like a grocery store or something, gets him involved. And these repo men, they're like hardcore gangsters. They're getting into gunfights. Like, it's a dangerous job. It's good satire and commentary. You know, people have talked about, well, it's commenting on nuclear war and stuff like that because the car that they end up finding has some secret, like, government nuclear something in it. I don't want to spoil it, but for it to be able to make a satire out of that and out of this, like, Reagan 80s America and still kind of come across pretty sincerely and be hilarious the whole time, it's really like the toughest kind of cult comedy to pull off. I mean, I can't believe how funny Harry Dean Stanton is in this movie and in the Pat Garrett movie that just came out on the Criterion. You know, if you've seen him in Paris, Texas, you might, you know, in that devastatingly emotional performance, you might, like, wonder where the comedy was, right? But I mean, he's so funny in this, and this is the kind of movie that, like, look at the packaging. It glows green because there's the radiation, you know, and it's just so fun. Cult comedies, they're supposed to be fun and a little bit insightful and a little bit satirical. I love it, and I think that a movie called Repo Man with this plot, with as silly as it is, should not be this entertaining. All right, so those are the three kind of campy movies that I wanted to talk about that I feel like are better than they really should be. And there's one that has fallen out of favor a little bit over the years that I still really enjoy. I watched it again with my wife recently. She had never seen it. And I found a copy of this thrifting in Colorado, and I've been looking for it. And I got a cheap copy, and I got it on Blu-ray, and it's called Enchanted. And I'm just the biggest fan of this movie. So if you've never seen Enchanted before, Amy Adams, earlier on in her career, plays at the beginning. She's in this animated world. She's a princess. Everything's going perfectly. And the movie goes to great lengths to make that funny, how perfectly it's going. And something happens, and she ends up in the real world in New York City, Times Square. Like, everything goes wrong. Her dress doesn't fit size-wise, which is a cute little detail in there, that it doesn't even, it's so wide that she can't even, like, navigate real life because there's so much dress baggage. And she meets someone who is a cynical lawyer. He's kind of dumb with, like, touchy-feely emotions. And they sort of have this great chemistry together, played by Patrick Dempsey. This movie, to be sort of like Disney spoofing their own product, making fun of themselves, for it to be this entertaining and well done, and for Amy Adams, who really nailed every single mannerism of a Disney princess. It even has one of the cameos, not even really a cameo, kind of just a supporting role, Jodie Benson, who played Ariel in the original Little Mermaid. Like, she's in there in kind of a against type role, which is really interesting. And just all the Easter eggs that are thrown in here from all these great Disney movies of the past. It's really clever. It's reverent of its subject matter. It is making fun of itself, but at the same time, there's a real heart and love and care for the concept of a Disney princess and what that might mean to younger girls. It all works so well. And the funniest thing is, I believe this is before Frozen came out, and it even has a small role from Idina Menzel, who would go on to be the voice of one of the Frozen characters, the Let It Go one. Can't think of her name right now. I love it. It's still funny. It holds up well, and it's fun to watch for the whole family. And finally, my favorite of these. I watched this at an airport of all places. I'd never seen it. I didn't have a whole lot to do. I was kind of sitting around and I wanted something that I didn't feel like would flash something inappropriate for anybody walking by. So I was like, what would be something wholesome I could watch that I would actually like? Because I can't watch Sleepaway Camp or something like that, at an airport. I watched An Inn in Tokyo from my favorite director, Yasujiro Ozu, who created some of the best movies ever made, the great legendary master. And this is his 1935 film. I watched it on the Criterion Channel. And it's a simple story. A laborer with 2 kids is down and out. He's walking across some railroad tracks. He's looking for a job. He's having trouble. There's sparse dialogue, as it is a silent film, but what is there? What you do read in it is quite frank and honest and brutal and at times depressing. It might remind you a little bit of, and it's been compared to this, The Bicycle Thieves, the Dosecki film, and in my opinion, it's pretty much as good as that one. And it has some of that trademark Ozu commentary on family and how family can be both a strength and a weakness for the human experience. He meets another woman, and she has a daughter, and some of that even almost feels a little bit like strikingly like Studio Ghibli modern. When I watched it, I felt like I didn't see the age of it, other than that the print I watched, which I'm sure is one of the better prints there on the channel, it had some like noticeable age and needed even more restoration, which I don't know that it could have anymore. The people there do a great job with restorations, but that one, Ozu films always have a way of scratching and digging into the deepest parts of who we are as people. A simple conversation, a smile, an exchange of looks between 2 characters. This film, as much as any that I've seen from him, is so good. And if you are someone who's been buying Criterions lately, like if you bought in one of the sales, like that Barnes & Noble sell, you may have picked up the Floating Weeds, A Story of Floating Weeds pack. I have the DVD of that. A Story of Floating Weeds, you should definitely watch on the silent movie that was remade as Floating Weeds. If you're already going down that route with Ozu, you'll probably enjoy An Inn in Tokyo. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 minutes. Do give it a watch. It should not be as good as it is because it is kind of like this old, beat up looking silent that delivers an emotionally devastating impact. And I think it's as good as pretty much any of his movies. I mean, it may not quite be like Tokyo Story or the remake of Floating Weeds or something like that, but I mean, it's really strong. So I definitely wanted to throw that in there as one that I feel like is under discussed from Ozu's masterful works. So, Sleepaway Camp, Godzilla vs. Spacegodzilla, Repo Man, Enchanted, and Inn in Tokyo. My 5 picks for this video that I wanted to share with you. What are some movies you feel like really shouldn't be as good as they are, that punch above their weight? Let me know in the comments below. Give it a like. Click that subscribe button if you haven't. Appreciate you helping grow the channel. We'll see you next time on Cody in the Cinema.